Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about some things that you might do about them. Joining me today is Amy Lavoie. Amy is the Chief People Officer at Torch. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Teri. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Do you want to say a few words about yourself and your background before we dive into the topic?
Yeah, sounds great. So I lead the people success team at Torch. And the title of our team is important because as I came into this role, it was important to me to signal that we really exist to help our people thrive. And I wanted to make sure and use some new language to signify a different intention. And the way that we're different is that we really bring the science of happiness and success at work into the way that our team is organized and the programs that we facilitate. So prior to this role at Torch, I have been leading product and research development teams for over a decade, focused on understanding that science of happiness and success at work, studying employee data and trends and how those are changing over time, and the key drivers that have the biggest impact. And so we've really worked that into the team at Torch and really trying to bring that science into the employee experience. So that's a little bit about me and how I think about the world of work.
Awesome. Well, Amy approached me a few weeks ago to talk about challenges in leadership and in particular leadership development. So we decided to defer that conversation and talk about it on the podcast. So our focus today is really how the world of work is evolving, and so are things like leadership skills. And what are we going to do about it? Does that sound like a good plan to you, Amy?
That sounds great. One of my favorite topics.
Awesome. Then let's get into the huddle. So I usually like to start with a definition to ground people, although I'm imagining it's leadership development. It's hard to define. But maybe just for purposes of this conversation, kind of how do you think about leadership development so people get an understanding of kind of where we're going?
I'm glad you asked that question because I feel like there is always so much baggage in some of these words and we automatically get into our own definitions and it can really change the way that you think about it. The way that we like to think about leadership development, I want to break it into the two words. First of all, we define leaders as anyone who takes responsibility for the success of those around them. It's really important that we not just think about leadership as a title or as the hierarchy, because the reality is that in today's world of work, people at all levels of the organization have an incredible amount of influence and anyone can be a leader. And so we really want to expand thinking when we talk about leadership so that it feels more accessible to more people and it can have a bigger impact. The word development is important as well. Sometimes I worry that we automatically associate development with career progression, which is a form of development. But the science would suggest that most people think about development in very personalized ways. It's a key driver of happiness and success. First of all, it's really important to most people, but it doesn't always look the same way. Some people might feel like development is really taking on challenging work assignments. Some people might see it as getting new exposure to a different path or building a network with more people who can help to teach them. It can mean career progression, moving up the ladder. It can mean things like getting more rewards and compensation, but it can mean a lot of other things as well. The way that I like to think of it is expanding impact and influence. That is ultimately sort of encompasses all of the different forms of development and growth. And that's ultimately what people are often looking for, is their ability to expand their impact, whether that be at the company or even beyond.
Yeah. And I think everybody learns differently, right? So their path to gaining that influence and impact may look different than other individuals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. What are how has leadership changed given today's environment? So hybrid and remote workforces are creating new challenges for leaders and people in general, workers in general. How do you see the skills changing at the leadership level as a result of those changes?
Yeah, we really have seen a shift. And I should say it's not just a shift, it's probably an expansion. It's kind of adding to the list of things that are important. In the past, the skills that leaders needed were really focused on driving results and building effective teams, really kind of a focus on that output that they are responsible for. But with all of the changes that you just cited and more, we're starting to see that skills are what we would define as more relational. They're focused on things like being more inclusive, interpersonal savvy, communications. And there's a lot of really interesting research that we've seen within our own data, as well as across other research that talks about this new currency of hybrid work. One of my favorites is from Sloan Management Review. And they said that to be successful in the new world of work, managers cannot depend only on hierarchical position as the basis for providing leadership. They must also recognize the role of relational power in hybrid work. And so it's really becoming the differentiator that allows you to accelerate influence and get to those outcomes, is not just based on what your title is, but based on how you are relating with others across the organization.
Right. There's those three pillars of influence, right? So there's the positional, where are you in the hierarchy, your expertise, like what do you know and how senior are you in that regard, and then the relationship or the relational type things. I mean, that we look for, interestingly enough, we look for people with that relational influence. We do a lot of change management work. And so we look for those people with the relational influence when we build our change advocate teams, because they're the ones in the organization that people listen to, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy.
It's
an interesting skill. Like talk about some of the ways that you build that particular skill.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say it is a harder skill to build than, well, the other two pillars that you talked about. Positional is your place in the hierarchy and your title. So that's a little bit more black and white. Your expertise, those are often going to come down to more of those technical skills. And that is an easier thing to actually teach than relational skills. And so that's something that we've really I've been diving into at Torch, is understanding what is the best way and most effective way to develop those relational skills. And Teri, I should back up for just a minute and mention a little bit more about what Torch does and why this is of interest to us. So we are a leadership development platform, and our mission is to unlock the potential of people, teams, and organizations. And we do that mostly through coaching and mentoring. So we're facilitating that through our technology to be able to scale what we call these trusted relationships to more people. So this is really core to what we do, and it's a need that we see the world having. And so some of the things that we are seeing is that leaders are really starting to understand that they can't use the traditional methods of development to get to these relational skills. So a lot of the traditional training and development is really kind of this one size fits all. Think about it as the traditional training program used to all be that we all file into a classroom. Now it's that we might be doing it all virtually, but it's largely the same experience regardless of your who you are or what you're focused on or what your specific strengths or opportunities are. And that can be quite effective. But what we have found is that it is not the only thing that you should lean on. And in fact, interestingly, what we found in some of the recent research that we did through Harvard Business Review Analytics Services is that leadership skills training is the most common development tool, with about 80% of participants saying that that's what they use, but only 35% feel like it is effective. And so there's kind of an over-reliance on it. The thing that we see is really making a difference in building these skills is supplementing that with a more personalized approach to skill development and leadership and relational skill development. So we see respondents in this study saying 86% saying that they agree that personalized leadership development, such as coaching or mentoring, is required in today's work environment. And the majority are saying that they see it as very effective or extremely effective. So it's significantly more effective than just training alone. And the reason is that when you have a coach or a mentor, you have the ability to take that standardized training or those standardized concepts and really enhance them to meet or adjust them to meet your own unique needs. And so you might have strengths in different areas that you don't need to work on, but some issues or opportunities in other areas, and having another individual to talk through that with, to better understand your unique leadership profile, to feel psychologically safe to explore where you might have to develop, and for someone to hold you accountable. Like, those things are so important to actually drive behavior change and to improve those relational skills.
Yeah. So I hear coaching, and obviously that can be a significant endeavor. It can also be an expensive endeavor. How are you helping organizations think about, where do we provide that coaching? Like, how do we identify the people that really need it, that are going to be the highest potential or have the highest potential to be successful from that coaching exercise? And is it ongoing? Like, once you have a coach, do you always have a coach? Or is this something you do for a couple of years and then you're kind of on your way?
Great question. The traditional approach to coaching has been, well, if you rewind way back, it was like sort of, if we have an executive who has a problem, then we should get them a coach to help them fix the major problem that's getting in the way of the organization. I would say fast forward a little bit, and we started to see it expand to really all executives need this partner who they can go to and confidentially talk through challenges and help them work through just the regular opportunities within their world of work. That is maybe somebody outside of the organization who they can have that trusted relationship with. In today, and with the help of technology, we have been able to expand it even further. And I always say, think about, by the time someone becomes an executive, it is often, there's like a lot of those patterns and norms are already set and like hard to undo. And it can be very expensive to wait and to like actually help employees help leaders and executives self-actualize at that point in their career, when so many things have kind of gotten them to this point. And so think about if we could actually allow more people earlier in their career, when they're still establishing those norms and figuring out their strengths, becoming more self-aware, figuring out what they need to focus on. If we can actually intervene at an earlier stage, you can lead to a lot more really effective leaders. And we know that succession planning is a huge challenge of really making sure you have the next generation of leaders. And so we really think about, how do we expand that pool and expand that accessibility to a lot more people so that it can have a greater impact than just a few people at the top of the house. So that's, first of all, I just wanted to kind of share high level that we think it doesn't need to just be the people who are in that executive suite. So a couple of additional things that we've found is that, first of all, it's important to cast a wider net and allow more people to take advantage of it. We have found that actually coaching readiness is one of the most important factors. And we like to think about moments that matter as opportunities to engage with a coach or with a mentor. And so that might be when you receive a promotion or when you take on people management for the first time. There are so many things that people are learning. There's a lot of just dynamics at play. Sometimes people are going from being a peer to being a manager of people that you were a peer with just the day before. And so how do you manage that dynamic? There can be a lot of imposter syndrome that happens as people move into these leadership positions. And so that's a moment when it may not coincide with, okay, June is when we do coaching at Acme Company, but it's actually the time that this employee needs it. And so being able to meet them at that time is really important. Another example would be when someone returns from a leave of absence. So it might be coming back from parental leave, coming back from a medical leave, coming back from bereavement. These are major life changes that can really influence the way that you show up at work and really make people kind of question and want to understand, like, who am I as a leader? And having a trusted partner to be able to do that with you can be incredibly powerful. We're seeing transformational impact when employers are offering these coaching services to people as they're going through a major life event. So I think that really thinking about it, not from the like, when is it convenient for our HR team to administer coaching, but really when are people going through a change that where they could really benefit from having a trusted partner to help them get through it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is, I'm not sure that we, in a lot of places, that we give people enough time to lead. It's always kind of that player coach type situation, right? Where you're still doing the work and now you're also leading a team. And that's hard. I mean, we've seen that in sports and other places. Being player coach is not an easy role, and some people will rise to the occasion. But, there's challenges with that when you don't have enough time to do the things and invest the time in the people on your team that you need to invest.
It's such a good point. And it's part of, often we give people the new title and maybe we have a promotion announcement email that goes out, but like nothing else, there's no other like moment of pause or signal of investment that we give to people. And so it's like, no wonder, I mean, one of the most common challenges I hear from leaders is that we have a lot of managers who were great individual contributors, but never actually developed the skills to be great people managers because they are very different skills. And I think of, at Torch, we do offer coaching to people when they move into a management role. And I think of it as a really important signal of investment in your growth. It's not just like, okay, hey, now you're a manager and we just gave you a new title and maybe we changed your pay, but we're actually investing in you doing this well. And it can have a huge impact because I find that most people that go into people management, they really want to be a good manager, but they also suddenly are like, everyone's looking to them on their team to have all of the answers. And because of the imposter syndrome that I mentioned, like they're kind of quick to just go into respond and not necessarily stop and reflect on like, how do I do this really well? And how do I build relationships with my people? And it's not just about having all of the answers. It's about leading with vulnerability or enabling people to step up. These are just things that just don't come naturally to a lot of us. And so I think it's really important to your point, like create the time and space, which is not always a luxury that we have in organizations. And so if you're not able to do that to the level you should, making sure that at least they have some support mechanisms in place because it's hard. And by the way, if the person, your hiring manager who put you into this role as a manager, they're also determining your career progression and your pay and your performance rating. And so you really can't feel safe talking to your manager about how hard it is to be a people manager. Like you feel like that relationship isn't always going to be the place where you can get the support that you need. So we need to create that in other relationships.
Yeah. And like you said, that you were peers with these individuals yesterday, and now today you have to figure out a way to offload some of your work to them because you're not going to have time to do the same level of work you were doing and lead the team. So that's hard. And I don't think we teach people how to do that. Like we just assume they'll know what to do. I can't remember a time in my career where I got promoted and my boss just took work off my plate. Like I had to figure out how to get that work off my plate if I was going to do the level of work that they were expecting me to do in that new job.
Yeah. And
I think that's the way it is.
It's true. And I would say even the way that you just described your approach, even being aware that you had to make some shifts and changes, I don't think we can assume all managers even know to do it at all, much less to do it. And so we often see across the data that our middle managers are struggling the most with burnout. They can often be the least engaged. They can often feel the least empowered. And partly because they are just taking more and more on without being really intentional about changing the dynamics of their workload. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's such a good point what you just raised. And sometimes people don't even have the awareness that they need to really start to change the way that they get work done. So they just take on more. And then that's like, how do you do your best work? How do you be the best leader when you're just exhausted?
Yeah, it can take you 2 steps backwards, 3 steps backwards. You take a couple steps forward and next thing you know, you're 3 steps back. And I think the impact on the teams can be very, very negative unless you've sort of got that understanding. I can see where having that knowledge and having somebody sort of help you over that threshold could make a big difference in how you get off the ground and how you get started in that new role and how you ensure that the people that you're now going to lead can do the work, right?
Yeah, totally. And you think about the culture that it creates when managers aren't enabled to do this well. Back to the burnout topic, which is just so common that organizations are struggling with it. If you have a manager who's just taking on more and more, they're sort of signaling to their team that like, that's how you get ahead at this organization, that you have to work all the hours, you have to just react. And that's not actually how you do great work. And so that starts to trickle down into, oh, this is just the way that we do things around here. And when an employee sees that and says like, that's not appealing to me, like that's when they leave, that's when they quiet quit, become disengaged. And so, we talk a lot at Torch about what we call the ripple effect, which is when you can become a more self-actualized and a better leader, when you can develop these relational skills, it not only has an impact on you as an individual, but it has an impact on all of the people that you work with, which might be part of your hierarchical team or cross-functionally. And then that continues to ripple out to the organization. And it's such a powerful concept when you can do that well. But I also think it's a powerful concept to think about when it goes wrong. So in the absence of really that more intentional, positive relational skills, that can really ripple out to much more negative command and control, lack of innovation, lack of psychological safety, increase in burnout, people not feeling empowered. Like there's just all sorts of things that are not healthy for a culture that can happen when you don't control the ripple.
Yeah. And we saw what the pandemic did over the last couple of years. I mean, I think it really changed people's perspective on what work-life balance means. Mm-hmm. And I think as you look at some of the younger generations coming into the workforce, I mean, they just have a completely different idea of how this is supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And they want to be able to, and we all do. I mean, we all want to make time for, if nothing else, this showed us we need to make time for our family and friends, right? And so how do I build my work around my life? Right. Yeah. And make sure that I can be successful at work and also be successful at home.
Yes. It's such a good point. And I do think pre-pandemic, the expectation was that you build your life around your work. And that is in terms of where your office is and how you commute and where your kids go to school and where like everything happens based on the decision of where I work. Well, that's totally been flipped on its head with any organizations that have moved to a hybrid model. And it's flipped on its head for employees who are saying, well, actually, I really think I want to live closer to my family. So I have a support system. I want to live in a place that works for my lifestyle because I like to be near the water, or I want to live in the middle of a city, or I want to have a farm. I mean, all of these things, it's now available to people. So if an organization is not facilitating it, then people will leave and go find one that is. And so, yeah, I think it's a really exciting and amazing time, because I love the way that you said this, Teri. It's now is the opportunity is for employees to be able to build work around their life instead of the other way around. And I think we'll actually get much more effective organizations, much more productive and high performing organizations when we get that right, because people will be able to do better work and work smarter than when there were just so many walls that dictated the way that work needed to get done, which honestly, there's no research to prove that we do our best work between the hours of 9 and 5 in a building, sitting in a cubicle next to others. Like, there's literally nothing to indicate that is how better work gets done. Those were the limitations because of structure.
Yeah. And it totally has been flipped on its head. I mean, it was interesting to see over the last year and a half where organizations said, come back to work. And people sort of did. And then they said, oh, no, I'm not going to drive an hour every day to and from work. I can get so much more done if I kick it off with work. I don't have to get in the car and drive for an hour just to get to an office I'm not necessarily doing anything different there than I'm doing at home sitting in front of my computer. So it was interesting to see how that was sort of demanded and successful in a lot of ways. I mean, I know there's still some people that have gone back to offices, but even the ones that have gone back to hybrid, 2 or 3 days a week in the office and a couple of days remote, where 3 or 4 years ago, there were so many people who wanted to work remote that it was just a no-go. Organizations were not open to it.
Right.
And there's still some challenges. There's still some pockets out there. And it's a good point coming back to leadership development, where leaders don't feel like they've got that line of sight to the people because they're not sitting in the office. And so they're not sure whether the level of productivity is there and how to measure it. So that's probably a topic for a whole nother podcast, but there's some people that are very happy with this approach. And then there are definitely some people that believe that they're not getting the level of productivity, or they're not getting the work out of people if they're working at home, which I think you're going to have your pockets, but all in all, I don't think that's a true statement.
Yeah. This topic is so fascinating to me, and it's been just really cool to see how the world has evolved. And it's funny, you kicked off with a statement that I think is so important, which is the conversation was come back to work, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes right now, come back to work. And I mean, just to study that statement alone, I have been sitting on my kitchen table for the last year. I've done more work and performed at a better pace. And you just used the words, come back to work. I have been working this whole time, but that just shows like so many leaders. I would always call leaders out when I would hear them say that and say, actually, you're saying come back to the work office or come back to the office, not come back to work, because we've been working. And it actually just shows your biases when you state it that way. The subliminal message, the underlying message there is that work can't get done unless you're in an office. And I do think that if you are a leader out there who thinks that work can't get done unless you're in an office, or it doesn't get done as well, or productivity can't happen if you're in an office, I would say just to kind of stop and reflect on your privilege and your biases that might have led to that. Did you have the ability fortunate enough to live in a higher cost of living place where you could commute into an office? Did you have childcare or a support system that allowed you to do that? Did you have maybe a spouse at home who could help care for the things that you needed? Did you have support from parents to be able to afford that first job out of college and live in an apartment in a really expensive city and put down a security deposit? Like there's all sorts of things that make it possible for people to easily work in an office. And it's not to say that is bad, but there is a lot that has helped us to be able to do that well. And it's also probably excluded a lot of people as well. And so I think just really getting creative and curious about what does it mean to do great work. That's ultimately what we're all after. It's not in an office or not. It's that we're doing the best work. And so instead of asking and assuming how do we get everybody back to the office, let's ask how do we help people to do great work in the circumstances that they are in? And you can come up with much better and more answers.
I have so many things that are rolling around in my head right now, and thinking that we're going to need to schedule another podcast down the road. But before we finish, I had a couple of other questions that I wanted to get to, so we don't go too far down that rabbit hole. So just kind of bringing this back to the leadership development and coaching and some of the work that you guys are doing. How are you starting to see organizations using AI for leadership development? How is that impacting what you guys are doing with respect to leadership development and coaching? Maybe that's a whole other podcast topic, but maybe just a 30-second view of that.
Yeah. So we are actively exploring what does this expanded technology open up for us to be able to do this really important work. And there's all sorts of fascinating ways that AI can help the HR suite. And I think that we would be silly to not embrace that, because there really are some ways that it can be super helpful and help us to be more efficient and help our employees to be more effective. On the coaching side, like I said, we're actively kind of researching and studying and looking at the science to understand how can we use this and what's the boundary, what's the limit to which we should use this? Because ultimately, when we're talking about human and relational skills, there is a point at which we actually don't think that AI is the answer. Some of our early hypotheses, and we've talked to a lot of industry analysts and experts about this as well, is that there's more that we can do with AI to help create great matches, help you to really connect a leader with a coach that's going to be the best match for them. There's ways that we can use AI to accelerate the time to insights. But when it comes to actually having that trusted relationship where you can be vulnerable and open up, like there is a need to have a human on the other side of that screen or of that call who is helping you to sort through this. And so I think we're looking at it as like, where can we use AI to continue? And we already, by the way, do use versions of machine learning to do matches and to help facilitate some of the supplemental learning that happens outside of that relationship. And we think there's a way to use it even more. But we also think there is a point at which the human relationship is where the magic happens. And so we want to really still center around that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it can help uncover some of the hidden gems that we might not be seeing directly, and especially in light of remote work where you're not necessarily seeing that person in action every day physically. I think AI can bring some of that information to the forefront and help leaders figure out who are in the best position to take that next step. Yeah. But I completely agree on the human front. And I did a podcast a few weeks ago on the perfect interview, and same thing, like leading up to everything. But then that interview has got to be real, and it's got to be authentic, and it's got to be a conversation. And you've got to figure out, is there a fit here? Is there a cultural match for this particular individual? And so, yeah, there's definitely some things that I don't see it taking over. But then I've also seen some interesting things recently where they've literally cloned a person and been able to have a conversation. That's a little scary. But yeah, a topic for another time. The last question I want to ask you before we close off, because we could just go all day, I think, on this topic. Can you think of any particular example, case study where somebody you think is really doing this right? If you had to give the audience some advice on setting themselves up for success, where are some places they could look to see a successful result? They could start to think about how they would utilize some of that information.
It's a great question. And we're studying this all the time to understand what those best practices are. We have a couple of great case studies on our website of customers who have really kind of brought some of these best practices to light. But I'll tell you, kind of agnostic of any one organization, that there are three things that we're seeing as really kind of leading the pack. And we've actually looked at who are the organizations that are leaders in leadership development. So getting like the most out of their leadership development investment. And the first thing I would say is to really make sure that as you're designing, whether it be a coaching program or leadership development program, that you're really aligning it to the organization's strategy. I think it's really important that we as HR practitioners don't just design in a box, that nobody's out there asking for one more thing to do. Leaders already have, and managers, and we already have our goals. We already have these things that we need to achieve as a business. So how do you help them do those things better and achieve those things more effectively and build great cultures around them while working on the thing that the business needs instead of giving them something separate to work on? Another important thing that we're seeing from these leading organizations is that they are really kind of expanding and including more people in these programs. So don't just depend on like, who do the executives see as high potentials, because there's a lot of bias in that. It's often going to be people that look and sound like us and might come from similar backgrounds, who are the ones that end up being able to kind of develop those informal networks. And that's just really one of the biggest reasons that we're struggling to see more diversity at the top of the house. And so really expanding who you give access to and doing that with a lens that removes some of the bias. And then finally, I would say is just making sure that you're measuring the impact. So as you're designing the program, think about how you're going to measure success so that you can show the ROI of these investments, because that's one of the things that can get in our way with HR programs, is that it feels like a nice to have, not a need to have. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that from the beginning, we are setting them up with a measurement strategy in mind so that we can understand the impact, make adjustments, just in the same way that other leaders around the business are making decisions for their own investments. So really using that measurement mindset from the beginning. So there's lots of additional ways to think about doing this well, but those are three things when I think about really designing the program that we've seen our best customers do.
Yeah, three great things. And I couldn't agree more. You've got to be able to sell it in order to do it, right? So one of the things we're doing a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a live podcast to talk about HR as a strategic partner. And I think that this is another great example of things that HR has to be able to sell this to the C-suite, right? To spend the money to do this, and just how important it is, and what's the cost of not doing it, right? That's huge. So that would be a great topic for another conversation for us to talk about. How do we sell these kinds of programs and help the organization understand the lost opportunity cost of not doing it? Because I think that's sometimes where we have a gap.
It's so true. I mean, I think that's one of the kind of important gaps that we often have. You think, okay, go build a great program and they will come. But really the selling of it, the branding of it. I was talking to one of our board members who's an HR thought leader. She was saying, I think branding and marketing within the HR function is like table stakes now. It's not a nice to have. Some people don't even think of it as a nice to have. It's not even on their list of haves. It's actually so important that we are hiring people that have communications backgrounds, or that we have somebody that's focused on communications, or that we're partnering with our marketing team, because employment brand and product brand can often be very connected. People are looking at both of those things. And so really making sure that you're bringing that branding and selling into everything that you're doing, because there are so many examples of building great stuff that nobody uses. And then it's like, where do you go from there?
Yeah. How do you recover? Well, Amy, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining me today on this important topic. Where can people find you online and on social?
I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love talking about these topics and would love to keep the conversation going with anyone out there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Amy Lavoie. I would love to connect there. Also, I write some blogs for Torch. So you can check out our company website, torch.io, where we have a lot of resources, including some of the research that I cited today. But we would love to continue the conversation. It's such an important one. And I know something we're all trying to figure out.
Great. Well, I want to thank a couple of other people. I want to thank our Brand Method Media Group who produces our podcast and will get this going for us. Our marketing team, Lisa and Zoe, who've just been fantastic about writing copy and making sure people hear these great podcasts that we're doing. And want to thank you, the audience, for tuning in. That is all the time we have today for HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review because we'd love to hear from you. You can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on the website. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.